Welcome back to the deep dive. You're here because you like to cut through the noise, right? Get to the heart of things. Well, that's exactly what we're doing today, diving deep into a major economic event that's got everybody talking.
Yeah, we're talking about the market's reaction to President Trump's announcement of those new tariffs, remember?
Yeah.
Big news.
Huge news, and we're going to break it all down for you. We've got our source material right here, a USA Today article. It's called Trump Tariffs Spark Market Plunge. Here's what could happen next. Pretty catchy title, right?
Definitely grabs your attention.
It does. And that's our mission today, isn't it? To really unpack what happened in the markets, how other countries responded, what the experts are predicting, and of course, what the Trump administration is saying about it all.
Exactly. We want to give you the full picture.
So let's start with the market plunge. The article mentions that President Trump made this announcement, on Wednesday. So what happened next?
Well, the markets definitely didn't like it. We saw, over just the next 2 trading days, the S&P 500, the big one that tracks 500 of the largest companies in the U.S., lost over $5 trillion in market value.
$5 trillion. Wow, that's a lot of money. What does that tell us about how investors felt?
It was a pretty clear signal, right? They were spooked. I mean, $5 trillion is a massive number. It's like wiping out the entire economy of, say, the UK, just like that. Shows you how worried investors were.
It does. And it wasn't just the S&P 500, right? Other indicators took a hit, too.
Yeah, it was a broad decline. The Dow Jones, that index of 30 major companies, dropped almost 8%. The S&P itself, as we said, over 9%. And the NASDAQ, which is more focused on tech companies, that one fell by 10%. So, yeah, not a good couple of days for the markets.
Not at all. And the article mentions this wasn't happening in a vacuum. It describes the broader economy as already being on shaky terrain. What were those underlying concerns?
Well, the article points to some anxieties about President Trump's economic policies in general, and his stance on trade, particularly international trade. So there was already this sense of unease, and then this tariff announcement comes along, and, well, it just added fuel to the fire, It probably made consumers even more uncertain about the future.
So the markets are down. There's this underlying economic worry. What about the rest of the world? How did other countries, our trading partners, react to these tariffs?
Let's start with China. Their response was pretty immediate and pretty strong. By Friday, they announced they were going to impose reciprocal tariffs, 34%, on everything imported from the U.S.
Everything. Wow. So why such a sweeping response? I mean, what was their rationale?
Well, they put out a statement, China's finance ministry did. They basically said that the U.S. tariffs were not in line with international trade rules. They felt it was undermining their interests, and they called it a typical unilateral bullying practice. So they clearly saw it as an unfair move by the U.S., and they felt they had to respond in kind.
Okay, so China hits back with their own tariffs. What about the European Union? The article mentions they were planning something too, right?
Right. As of Sunday, the report said they were likely to approve some countermeasures, targeted ones, on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. imports. They were going to formally propose it the next day, on Monday.
Okay, so a bit more targeted than China's approach. What kind of U.S. goods were they looking at?
This is interesting, actually. The list they were considering, it seemed to be in response to President Trump's earlier tariffs on steel and aluminum, not just these new ones. So things like meat, cereals, wine, wood, clothing. Oh, and also some everyday items. Chewing gum, dental floss, even vacuum cleaners and toilet paper.
Toilet paper, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting choice. Makes you wonder what the strategy was there.
Yeah, I mean, were they trying to hit politically sensitive sectors? Or maybe focus on goods where, European companies are already strong competitors. Yeah. It's hard to say for sure.
So we've got the markets down, trading partners retaliating. What are the economists saying about the potential long-term economic impact? What could this all lead to?
Well, this is where we get to the recession talk. Several economists, they're warning that President Trump's tariffs have increased the likelihood of a recession. And at least one is outright predicting it.
A recession? That's a pretty serious warning. Any specific names mentioned in the article?
Yeah, Jim Cramer, the Mad Money guy, he didn't mince words. He called the market drop a man-made obliteration. And he said we could see sell-offs like we saw during COVID or the dot-com bubble burst. He even mentioned the possibility, the worst-case scenario, of a Black Monday type event, like that huge crash back in 1987.
Wow. So what would trigger that worst-case scenario, according to Cramer?
He basically said that if the president doesn't, reach out and reward the countries that play by the rules, then we're in trouble. So he's saying that if there's no diplomatic effort, if the hard line on tariffs continues, that's when things could really spiral out of control.
Okay, so Kramer's pretty worried. What about Bill Ackman? The article mentions him too, right? And he's been a Trump supporter in the past.
Yeah, he endorsed Trump in the 2024 election, actually. But even he's expressing concern. He said he still thinks a postponement of the tariffs is possible, but he's worried that if it doesn't happen, the uncertainty will push the economy into a recession. And not just any recession, a potentially severe one, he said.
So even someone who's been in Trump's corner is sounding the alarm. Did the article mention any official forecasts from big financial institutions?
Yeah, JP Morgan's chief economist, Michael Feroli, he put out a forecast to their clients predicting a recession because of these tariffs. He also sees the unemployment rate climbing above 5% by the second half of 2025.
5%? That would be a significant jump. What about their GDP projections?
So they're predicting a contraction, a shrinking of the economy, 1% in the third quarter of this year, and then another 0.5% in the fourth quarter. And they're attributing that directly to the tariffs.
So a lot of concern, a lot of negative predictions. What's the Trump administration saying about all this? Are they having second thoughts about the tariffs?
Well, from what the USA Today article says, it seems like they're holding firm. Their message is the tariffs are happening, and they're not up for negotiation. They made that pretty clear on the Sunday talk shows.
I remember seeing those interviews. They did seem pretty adamant. Did the article quote anyone specifically?
Yeah, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on Face the Nation. He said, and I quote, "The tariffs are coming. He announced it, and he wasn't kidding. The tariffs are coming. Of course they are." So, yeah, no ambiguity there.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was on Meet the Press.
Exactly. And he doubled down, saying these problems have been going on for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that it's bad behavior by other countries. And he basically said this isn't something you just negotiate away quickly. So they're digging in their heels despite the market reaction, despite what other countries are doing.
Okay, so to recap, we've got a big market drop, retaliatory tariffs from China, the EU planning their own countermeasures, economists warning about a recession, and the Trump administration standing firm. That's a lot to take in.
It is. And it really highlights the complexity of the situation. The article gives us a good overview, but it's just the beginning. Right?
Absolutely. And it makes you think, about the interconnectedness of everything. You make a move in one area, like with these tariffs, and it ripples out, has all these unintended consequences.
Exactly. And that's something for you, our listeners, to ponder. We've talked about the immediate fallout, the predictions, but what about the bigger picture? How will these tariffs play out in the long run? What other factors, things we haven't even considered, might come into play? It's a complex web, and the story's far from over.
Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive, everyone. We'll keep you informed as the story develops.